body in a cooler, and then, along with his sister, leaving the container near the Henry Hudson Parkway, according to police.
Our first case today involves a horrifying discovery found in a refrigerator. We will discuss how the identity of the discovery was determined and the tragic story that emerged years later. Additionally, we will investigate the unexplained disappearance of 2 girls during Easter and the subsequent capture of their murderer years later. Brace yourselves. We're stepping into the crime scene now. We're heading to Manhattan, which is in New York City, the largest city in the United States. So back in July of 1991, the city police received a really scary phone call. It was from 2 construction workers who were down south, and they noticed a really horrible smell. They decided to follow it and see where it was coming from. And guess what they found? They found a blue and white refrigerator just sitting there in a wooded area off the road. And as they got closer, the smell got worse and worse. Inside the fridge, they found some soda cans and the remains of someone's life in a black bag. At first, the officers thought it might be animal remains because they were near a dumping ground. But after digging deeper, they found a human skeleton belonging to a young girl. Her hands were tied together with rope and she was completely naked. She had decayed quite a bit. The soda cans had exploded because of the heat, indicating that something terrible had happened. Unfortunately, acid leakage made it impossible to analyze any forensic evidence, like fingerprints or DNA. So they sent the body for an autopsy, but due to decomposition, identification was impossible. However, they did find some important information. The victim was possibly Hispanic, between 3 to 5 years old, and had her hair tied back in a ponytail with long, wavy black hair. She was clearly malnourished and only weighed 12 kilograms, which was a lot less than a child her age should weigh. The autopsy report revealed something truly horrifying. She had been sexually abused, but the cause of death was asphyxiation. They couldn't find any clues to identify her or locate her family, which made the case even more complicated. So, the NYPD detectives appealed to the public for help, urging anyone with information to come forward. The case received a lot of media attention, but despite their efforts, they didn't make much progress. Then, 6 days after the remains were found, they received a call from a woman who saw a Hispanic man and woman carrying a cooler and wearing high heels. They were walking north near the Hudson Tolls, heading to a wedding on a Sunday. However, she didn't want to help with a sketch. Since they still didn't know the girl's name, they called her Baby Hope, a name symbolizing hope. Weeks turned into months of investigation, but interest started to fade, and the case went cold, with the body kept at the police department's morgue. Then, on July 23, 1993, the second anniversary of finding Baby Jane Doe's remains, the police department organized a final tribute. Officers in uniform, along with 8 children, carried the small coffin to Campbell Funeral Home in Wadsworth. Manhattan's chief detective, Jerry Giorgio, played an active role in the funeral, and the community showed their support. The police department was determined not to give up on the case and reopened it every year on the anniversary of her death to raise awareness and maintain hope. But, despite their continuous efforts, the case remained unsolved well into the 2000s. Then, in 2006 and 2011, they exhumed Baby Jane Doe's body to use advanced DNA technology. On the 22nd anniversary of the discovery, detectives went around the neighborhood handing out flyers with the girl's sketch and a photo of the cooler, offering a cash reward for any valuable information. And finally, their persistence paid off when a tipster contacted the police. It turns out that this tipster overheard a conversation at a laundromat suggesting that a woman could be Baby Jane Doe's sister. The police gathered information about the woman's family and found an address. They then visited a 27-year-old named Lorena, who bore a striking resemblance to Baby Jane Doe. The detectives explained their visit and started asking Lorena about her sister. Lorena shared that she had lived with her father's family for many years before reuniting with her own family. She also mentioned a childhood memory of seeing a body being put in a cooler and trash bags in another room, although she couldn't remember the girl clearly. Months later, after hearing Baby Jane Doe's story on TV, Lorena began connecting the dots. When the detectives asked about their mother for a DNA test, Lorena informed them that they were still in contact and that her mother lived in New York. With Lorena's cooperation, the detectives paid a visit to Margarita Castillo, Baby Jane Doe's mother, and questioned her. Initially hesitant, Castillo eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample after seeing the sketch of Baby Jane Doe. And then came the agonizing wait for the test results. Finally, the DNA matched, confirming Margarita Castillo as Baby Jane Doe's mother. Detectives had been wondering about the story of a baby who remained unnamed in Manhattan Cemetery for over 2 decades. Margarita started revealing the story of Baby Jane Doe, who turned out to be her daughter, Angelica Castillo. Angelica was born on April 24, 1987, to Margarita and Gennaro. However, a few years after her birth, Angelica's life took a dark turn. Gennaro developed a reputation for being abusive, which terrified Margarita. The constant arguments escalated into violence, prompting Margarita to make the decision to separate from him. She took her 3 daughters and moved to another city, but they continued to have contact with Gennaro. Eventually, Gennaro made a strange request to Margarita, asking her to let Angelica and Maribel stay with him while she kept Lorena. Margarita reluctantly agreed to this coercive demand due to Gennaro's violent nature. She felt compelled to leave the children with their father, and after the separation, she was only able to visit them a few times. When Gennaro disappeared, Margarita reached out to his nephew, Juarez Ramirez, to ask about her children and the possibility of getting them back. Juarez assured her that they were safe, but refused to give them to her, fearing Gennaro's wrath. At a relative's funeral, with neither her daughter nor Gennaro in sight, and no one aware of the girl's whereabouts, Margarita left empty-handed. Sometime later, a woman contacted her, urging her to take her daughter back. However, Angelica was nowhere to be found, and due to her fear of Gennaro, Margarita did not approach the police. Years later, the detectives focused on Gennaro as their main suspect. A widespread search was launched, but astonishingly, it yielded no results. There were rumors that Gennaro had fled to Mexico to start a new life, leading people to believe that Angelica's killer would never be found, and that the case was closed. Nevertheless, the police continued their investigation and turned their attention to a new suspect, Gennaro's cousin, Suarez, who surprisingly remained in contact with the family and lived in Manhattan. Even though he had a criminal record that included sexual assault, the police confronted him at a Manhattan restaurant where he worked as a dishwasher. Initially, Suarez denied any involvement in the murder. However, after 2 hours of interrogation, he confessed. He recounted a night in July 1991 when he visited his sister Valvina's house and came across 4-year-old Angelica, who needed to use the bathroom. Instead of helping her, Suarez attempted to assault her in his room. Losing control, he tied her to a table, and as she screamed, he smothered her with a pillow until she became motionless. Suarez then told his sister Valvina that they needed to get rid of the body, and Maribel witnessed the events. They bound Angelica's hands and feet, placed her in a cooler from their garage, put soda cans inside to avoid arousing suspicion, and disposed of her remains in a wooded area. Suarez instructed Valvina to keep the incident a secret, and she did until she took the gruesome secret to her grave in 1995, while Suarez continued his life as if nothing had happened. He also admitted to mistreating Angelica, subjecting her to constant torture and starvation. Years later, following his horrific confession, inspectors arrested Suarez and charged him with first-degree murder. However, while awaiting trial, Suarez passed away from pancreatic cancer on November 19, 2018. The following year, the Manhattan Supreme Court officially closed the case after the sole suspect's death. Genaro Ramirez, who had left his home and never returned, remains unknown to this day. Before we dive into our next story, if you could take a moment to hit that like button, it would mean the world to us. A single click for you is a huge boost of encouragement for us. Catherine and Sheila Lyon were born in Kensington, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. They grew up with their brother Jay, and their father, a well-known radio personality, worked at the local radio station WML-FM. On March 25, 1975, the sisters left home to visit the Easter exhibits at Wheaton Plaza Shopping Center. It was just a short walk, a little over half a mile. They planned to have lunch at a pizza place in the mall and be back home by 4 p.m. But by 7 p.m., the girls hadn't returned, and their mother, Mary, started to worry. Mary went to almost all their friends' houses and searched the dark, empty streets for any sign of her daughters. Eventually, she decided to call the police. Usually, the police would wait 24 hours before taking action, but they sensed something was wrong and started a thorough investigation at the girls' home. Their bedroom was undisturbed, their piggy banks were full, and their closets were untouched. After gathering initial witness statements, the police created a timeline on the girls' last known movements and shared it with the public. They were seen leaving home around 11 a.m., and friends in the neighborhood saw them talking to an unidentified man around 1 p.m. Their brother saw them eating pizza at 2 p.m., seemingly without any trouble, and they were last spotted heading home around 3 p.m. A witness provided a detailed description of the unidentified man. He was approximately 6 feet tall, aged between 50 and 60, wearing a suit and carrying a tape recorder, which caught the attention of local children. This man became the primary suspect, and composite sketches were distributed, leading to tips from the public. One person resembling the sketch had been seen at other shopping centers, interacting with children a week prior. However, detectives couldn't find any direct connection between these sightings and the girl's disappearance. Another friend of the sisters reported seeing a different man with long hair at the mall on the day they went missing. According to the witness, this man watched the girls intently and even made eye contact with them. A sketch artist created a drawing based on this description. The sketch depicted a young man in his 20s with acne and a scar on his left cheek, dressed in shabby clothes. Initially, this sketch wasn't widely circulated as the focus remained on the tape recorder carrying suspect. Volunteer searches continued for 2 weeks after the girls vanished, with people scouring vacant lots and stream beds. The case gained media attention, prompting the Maryland deputy governor to deploy 120 soldiers to aid in the search. Unfortunately, no trace of the girls was found. 2 weeks after their disappearance, a witness reported seeing 2 girls in the back of a van who resembled the Lyon sisters. The girls were allegedly bound and gagged, and the driver resembled the man in the sketch. The witness followed the van but eventually lost track of it. They could only provide a partially seen license plate number to the sheriff's office, and the police pursued it. Although this lead was initially seen as credible, the witness later raised suspicions and was interrogated. The case attracted attention from psychics, opportunistic criminals, and those seeking notoriety. Some even claimed to have the girls and demanded ransom, causing torment for the Lyon family. On April 4th, someone contacted the girl's father, John, and instructed him to leave $10,000 in the bathroom of the Annapolis courthouse. The police were informed, and a bag containing $200 was placed in the bathroom, but nobody came to collect it. The caller later complained about the heavy police presence preventing him from retrieving the ransom and never contacted John again, despite John expressing a desire to hear his daughter's voices. The case went cold until the early 1980s when Fred Howard Coffey emerged as a suspect. Coffey had been convicted in 1979 for the brutal murder and assault of a 10-year-old girl. He later confessed to killing his own wife and teenage son. Although he was questioned about the Lyon sisters, no evidence was found at his former residence. Coffey passed away in prison in 2004. In 2013, the detectives who had been working on the Lyon sisters case either passed away or retired. Detective Chris Homrock carefully reviewed every detail of the original investigation and made an astonishing discovery. A sketch of the man with the tape recorder had been published in newspapers, leading a man named Lloyd Lee Welch to contact the police. Lloyd confirmed that he had seen the girls talking to a man and claimed to have witnessed him forcibly taking them into a car. Lloyd was interrogated at a nearby police station and failed a polygraph test. When asked why, he admitted to providing false information and supposedly left the station without facing any consequences. The interview file was disregarded as a lie for 38 years, and no one ever questioned its accuracy. Detective Homrock researched Lloyd and found a youthful photo that resembled the sketch drawn by the girls. Curious about Lloyd's whereabouts, Chris discovered that he had been convicted of child molestation and decided to visit him in prison. During the visit, Lloyd claimed to have no recollection of going to the police station or taking a lie detector test. Chris showed him his statement from 1975, prompting Lloyd to reflect on his memories and hopefully recover them. Lloyd then changed his statement, recalling that he had seen the man and the girls not at the mall, but on the street. He also claimed that years of extensive drug use had impaired his memory. Detective Davis warned Lloyd that he wasn't considered a suspect in the case, but could become one if he didn't share what he knew. Suddenly, Lloyd's memory improved, and he confessed to not being involved in the crime. He insisted that he hadn't killed anyone, but admitted to being at the mall that evening. Although Lloyd wasn't forthcoming with information, the detective was determined to uncover new details, so he reached out to Lloyd's living relatives. Lloyd's cousin, Henry Parker, stated that in 1975, he was at a mountain cabin with Lloyd, who was carrying 2 heavy sports bags covered in red stains. Unaware of their contents, Henry admitted to burning the bags. On February 4, 2014, detectives announced that they were investigating Lloyd's connection to the sisters' disappearance. Lloyd, who was 18 in 1975, had continued to commit crimes and had been convicted of rape in 3 states. Police searched the mountain cabin mentioned by Henry and seized several items. The cabin, which belonged to Lloyd's family and where he had lived in the basement for years, had a significant amount of blood in one room. Although the evidence was too degraded for DNA extraction, detectives were confident they were in the right place. In July 2015, Lloyd Welch, who was already serving a long sentence for molestation, was charged with the murder of the Lyon sisters. Eventually, in 2017, he appeared in court and pleaded guilty to the abduction and murder of the sisters. He was sentenced to 48 years in prison for 2 counts of first-degree murder and is now awaiting execution. Before we conclude this video, please be aware that the video on the left may be disturbing. It is recommended for adult viewing only. On the right, you'll find a playlist of videos that have been highly appreciated by our viewers.